Hey, what's up, my people? I'm so happy that you guys are back this week again. First of all, thank you for supporting my channel, Hill Tribe Storyteller. And again, my name is Zha, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed my stories so far and are ready to hear some more this week. I know that my stories might not be the same as the ones that you might have heard from other storytellers, but remember, these are oral stories that have been passed down from my parents to me and from their parents to them, so they're subject to change. And I hope that by sharing these stories with you guys, I'll be able to preserve my culture for my kids and future generations. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to join me this week for another episode of the Misadventures of Zha. So this week's episode will be the last episode about King and Zha. Now, this doesn't mean that this is the last episode ever. There are still many more stories out there about Zha and King, and even more stories about Zha, but I haven't heard of them. These are the stories that my parents have shared with me, so they're the ones that I know. So if there's anybody out there that knows more stories about King and Zha, or more stories about Zha, please share it with me and I'll do my best to share it with the rest of the world. Now this week's story is going to be a sad one. It is the last one, and it's titled, The Last Laugh. A long, long time ago, there was a man named Zha. And we all know that the feud between Zha and King has been growing since the beginning of the stories. So King has finally had enough of Zha's foolishness, and he has decided that he's going to end Zha once and for all, so he can rid of Zha, and Zha can no longer be a thorn in his side. After all the things that Zha has done to him, King could not forgive him anymore. He lied about working on the trails, he made King eat dog poo, and even convinced King that there was a lake full of treasure, so that King was willing to tie himself up to a tree and almost killed himself. So this was it. King has had enough. King knew that Zha was a very smart man, so using the local herbs and drugs around the village wouldn't work on Zha. If he had presented it to Zha, Zha wouldn't take it, so that wouldn't work. But that didn't stop King from trying. King came up with a brilliant idea. He would go around the village gathering the nastiest things that he could find and put it in a bamboo container. Then he would give it to one of his servants and tell them to deliver it to Zha. He would instruct them to tell Zha that these were perfumes sent from America, and since him and Zha were such good friends, he wanted to share some with Zha, and hopefully Zha would smell it and the gases would knock him out. Yeah, that was a great idea. So King proceeded to go and find the nastiest, smelliest things he could find around the village. King found some rotten fish, and he stuffed it in the tube. And then he came upon some old tofu, and he stuffed it in the tube. Then he came upon some dog poo, and he stuffed it in the tube. After he filled the tube, he let the tube ferment for 3 days and 3 nights. And man, after those 3 days and 3 nights, it was pungent and ripe, and it smelled the nastiest smell that you've ever smelled. He capped it up, summoned his servant, and instructed them to bring it over to Zha's house. Now he gave them specific instructions. Only Zha can smell the tube, and for them not to open the tube prior to giving it to Zha. King instructed them to tell Zha that this tube was filled with perfume that was shipped from America, and since King and Zha are such close friends, King was willing to share it with Zha. Now this perfume is one of the sweetest, most elegant smell that one has ever smelled on earth. Taking a whiff of it would bring them closer to heaven. It was that heavenly. And for Zha to smell it and tell King what he thought. The servants were to observe Zha's reaction and report back to King. They told King they understood, so they took the tube and went off to Zha's house. When they got to Zha's house, they knocked on the door, and Zha answered. He said, "What's up, guys? What brings you to my neck of the wood?" And the servant said, "Well, Zha, today King wanted us to bring you a gift. This here tube contains perfume from America." And King said it's some of the sweetest, most elegant fragrance that he has ever smelled. And since you and him are such good friends, he wanted to share some with you. And Zha said, "Oh, really? Perfume, you say?" Zha knew that King and Zha weren't the best of friends. so he knew King was up to something fishy. Before he took the tube, he told the servants that he would have to check with his wife first to see if he's allergic to anything. And the servants believed him and said, okay, we'll wait for you. You can go check, and then when you come out, you can smell it for us and tell us what you think so we can go and report back to King. Zha went inside his house and asked his wife if they had any tiger balm left. She said, yeah, they did. So she got him some tiger balm, and he rubbed some under his nose. Now, after he applied the medicine, all he could smell was the minty menthol scent of the tiger balm. He came back outside and said to the servants, okay, guys, I'm ready. The servants then handed Zha the tube, and Zha cracked it open and took a big whiff from the mouth of the tube. But all he could smell was the minty menthol scent of the tiger balm. But he lied. He told the servants that it was the most delicious fragrance that he has ever smelt in his life. It reminded him of the freshly bloomed flowers in the early morning of spring. He capped the container and gave it back to the servants. He told them to report back to King that it was a wonderful fragrance, and to thank King for sharing it with him, and for King to enjoy the fragrance. So the servants took the container and headed back to the palace. When the servants returned, King was anxiously waiting for them, hoping to hear the news that Zha passed out from his stinking concoction. He said to them, so what's the report? And they said, well, King, we hate to report this to you, but Zha actually really enjoyed the perfume that you gave him. King's like, what? Zha enjoyed the perfume that I gave him? It should knock him out. And the servant said, no, he didn't get knocked out by it. He actually took a pretty big whiff of it, and he said that he enjoyed it, and it reminded him of the freshly blossomed flowers in the early spring. And King's like, no, that can't be right. Give me that container. So King took the container from them, cracked it open, and took a big whiff. Oh, man. Oh, it was nasty. It was not sweet. It was not delicious. It was pungent and stinky. And before King knew it, he blacked out. King came to about a day later. He got up, disorientated and dizzy, asked the queen what happened. And the queen said, well, King, you smelled your own concoction and you blacked out. That's what happened. And King said, oh, man, I can't believe that Zha tricked me into smelling my own stinking gas. I just don't know what to do with that guy anymore. So King summoned his servants to fetch the local merchant to see if the merchant had any medicine to help King with his headache. And so they did. When the merchant arrived, to King's surprise, it was the Chinaman that almost drowned the other day when they were trying to drown Zha in the lake. When the Chinaman saw King, he said, brother, do you remember me? And King said, yes, I remember you. And the Chinaman said, you tried to drown me in the lake. And King replied, no, I didn't try to drown you in the lake. You see, there's this guy named Zha, and he's been a real pain in my side, and I was trying to drown him. But you see, he tricked you into replacing him on that tree, and we didn't know, so we thought you were him, so we chopped down the tree. We were so sorry that you almost drowned. And the Chinaman said, well, brother, in that case then, he's the bad guy. And King said, yeah, he is the bad guy. And I've been trying to get rid of him. And the Chinaman thought about it and said, have you tried to poison him? And King said, I thought about it, but every poison that we have around this village, Zha knows about, so he won't take it. And the Chinaman smirked, and he said, brother, you are lucky today. Today I have special deal. I have poison from my country. Very, very good. That man Zha will never know what hit him. And King said, oh, really? You don't say. And the Chinaman pulled out some white powder and gave it to King and said, King, you have to mix this medicine, this poison, with alcohol, okay? You cannot give it to him with water. You have to give it to him with alcohol. And when it mixed with the alcohol, that man Zha, he be dead man. And King said, oh, really? Well, thank you, Chinaman. I think my headache is gone. So then, King thanked the Chinaman and sent him on his way with a couple bars of silver, and King was as happy as a kid in a candy shop. So the next day, King came up with an evil plan. He would throw Zha a big party and apologize to him publicly in front of all the villagers, and then he would ask Zha for forgiveness for all the times that he has tried to kill Zha, and he would make a toast so that Zha would have to consume the poisoned beverage in front of everyone. This way, Zha would have no chance of testing the poison. He would have to drink it, and if he didn't, he would be the disrespectful one for not accepting King's apology. So for the next couple days, King gathered the finest culinary treats he could find throughout the village. He also sent out invitations to all the villagers to come and witness his public apologies to Zha. So when the invitations got to Zha's house, Zha knew that King was up to no good. He knew that King would not apologize to him publicly, because vice versa, he wouldn't do the same for King. So he sat his wife down and said, "Honey, I truly think that King has something evil planned for me this time, and I don't think that I'm gonna be able to outsmart my way out of this one. So I want you to make me a promise. If I happen to die from this event, I want you to promise me to not prepare my funeral until you hear King's funeral procession come through town. Instead, I want you to dress me up in my finest clothes, sit me down in my favorite chair, and place a book in my hand. I want you to capture a bumblebee and place it in a squash next to me, and then light a candle for me. Now would you do that?" And his wife said, "Yes, Zha, if that is your wish, that's what I'll do." So finally the big day came. Everyone showed up at King's house, including Zha and his wife, and King threw a big old party with roast duck and steak and all the pastry that one could imagine. And they ate and celebrated, and King made an open apologies and sobbed and asked Zha for forgiveness and put on this big show. Then finally, King made the toast. He toasted to forgiveness, for Zha to forgive him for all the wrongs that he has done to Zha, and for him to forgive Zha for all the wrongs that Zha has done to him. There was no way for Zha to escape this one, so he raised up his glass and drank the poisoned beverage to King's toast. He tried to enjoy the rest of the party, and then him and his wife finally went home. By the time Zha got home, the poison had already reached his internal organs, and the next day he died. After he died, his wife dressed him up in his finest clothes and sat him down on his favorite chair, placed a book in his hand, The Misadventures of Zha, lit a candle, caught a bumblebee, and put it in a squash next to him. That night, King summoned his servants and said, "Servants, I want you guys to go over to Zha's house and see if he's still alive." So the servants did. They rushed over to Zha's house and they peeked through his window. To their surprise, Zha was sitting in his favorite chair, wearing his finest clothes, and reading a book. He was mumbling out loud. They couldn't hear exactly what he was saying, but they could hear him talking to himself. So they were like, "Oh my goodness, Zha's still alive. King's poison didn't work." So they rushed back and reported to King. When they got back to the palace, they reported to King that Zha was still alive. They saw it with their own eyes. They saw him sitting in his favorite chair, reading a book with a candle lit next to him. And he was mumbling to himself. They couldn't make it out, but he was mumbling to himself. So he was definitely alive. And King was furious. He said, "That Chinaman told me that this poison was the best from his country, and to mix it with alcohol. Are you guys sure you mixed it with alcohol when you served it to Zha?" And the servant said, "Yes, we did, King. We did exactly as you instructed us." And the King's like, "Well, that Chinaman must be full of crap. Go get my poison. I'm going to try it for myself." So the servants rushed over to his cabinet and got him the poison. King poured it into a cup and mixed it with some rice wine, and he drank it all. A couple minutes later, the poison started to kick in, and King started to feel the effect of the poison. Slowly, King fell into a deep slumber, and he eventually died. A day later, the queen and the servants prepared a royal funeral for King. They celebrated his life through a big old party and paraded his body throughout the village. When his funeral processions passed Zha's house, Zha's wife finally threw a proper funeral for Zha. His wife then took his body and buried it high in the mountains of Laos, so that Zha could watch over the country that he loved so much. And to this day, not everyone believes that Zha died. They think that Zha outsmarted King and ran into the jungles and hid there for the rest of his remaining life. Now, if you listen carefully while you're in the mountains of Laos, you can still hear Zha having the last laugh. So this concludes the Misadventures of Zha, and I want to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to come and listen to my stories. Because of you, I'm able to tell these stories and share it to the world. And remember to like and subscribe to my channel, Hill Tribe Storyteller, and like always, I will see you next story.